wine, Coca-Cola, Marmite, renewable energy, TEDx talks. Welcome to episode 4 of the PrintPod, Print Island with Richard Askam. Hello Richard.
Hello Christopher.
Welcome to Infigo and the PrintPod.
I feel welcome, thank you.
I'm going to ask you a series of questions.
Okay.
And I'm looking for some true or false responses.
Just true or false?
Just true or false, just to warm you up.
Thank you.
30 years experience in the wine industry.
True.
Born in Cleethorpes.
True.
Personalised peanut butter campaigns.
False.
Personalised Marmite campaigns.
True.
You were behind the Coca-Cola iconic Share a Coke campaign and were the key UK driver.
True-ish.
Expand.
Me personally or the story?
Both.
It was broader than the UK. We actually managed the Share a Coke campaign in what Coca-Cola call NWEN, Northwest European and Nordics. So we actually looked after 14 countries in Europe.
So technically it's false.
Yeah.
More than UK.
Okay. I was taking the positive. True-ish.
Great. Okay. And true or false? Tens of millions personalised bottles sold worldwide?
Yeah, there was two elements to the true. Sorry, there were two elements to the campaign. There was the bottles and cans that were put into stores, pre-printed with popular names, and then there was the online campaign which I did, which allowed the customer to actually type their own name in, although it was rendered from a database of 500,000 names.
Hold that thought. We'll come back to that later.
Okay.
I think I have one more question. You're a TEDx talker? True or false?
True.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So let's start at the beginning then.
Bye.
Bye, yeah, see ya. Let's start at the beginning. What's the link with Grimsby?
The link with Grimsby is it's next door to Cleethorpes, which is where I was born. And in fact, it's the true fact about Grimsby is Grimsby Town Football Club are the only football league club that don't play in their hometown.
Where do they play?
They play in Cleethorpes, which is where the ground is, separated by one street from the metropolitan borough of Grimsby, the royal borough of Grimsby, in fact.
Royal. And what's the street that separates them?
Park Street.
Oh my goodness.
Which is the dividing line between Grimsby and Cleethorpes. It is, as the Americans would say, contiguous. So there is no gap between Grimsby and Cleethorpes. They run into each other.
Okay.
But if you're from Cleethorpes, you look down on Grimsby.
Why?
Well, mainly it's on a hill, but metaphorically, I don't know. People from Cleethorpes seem to think they're slightly better than people from Grimsby.
Okay. My question was more aimed at your activities in Royal Grimsby.
Yes. Or currently, or historically?
Both. So historically first.
Well, historically, it's where my family's from, and my 30 years in the wine business that you reminded me of. Thank you for reminding me how old I am. My family background is the drinks business. My dad was in the brewing industry actually for many years since the 50s, and so I grew up with alcohol. That sounds wrong.
Depends on what context you grew up with it, doesn't it?
Well, I was given it from a very early age, so it was always about it's not drinking, Chris. It's research.
Yeah, research. Okay. I mentioned before, or we spoke before about some projects that you're working on in Grimsby. One being renewable energy. You're working on highlighting an offshore wind farm. Is that correct?
It's more the highlighting of the industry and the opportunities that come from that. And unfortunately, there's two things. Grimsby's got a great bit of good fortune that's come its way in that it is perfectly located to be able to supply and service the offshore wind industry, which is literally just offshore. The downside is because it's offshore, nobody can see it. So the good people of the area who have got a lot of opportunities, career, education, all sorts of opportunities, can't see those opportunities and therefore largely and naturally don't believe that they exist.
Okay.
So we've created a town centre. It's a box park actually, made of repurposed shipping containers as an education centre for the renewable sector, so that people in the town can learn a little bit more, not least of which about renewable energy for their own benefit, but also potentially for their life, career, opportunity benefit.
Okay. And what's the plans this year for that project?
It's expanding. It arrived last year. It's been 2 years in the making. I was challenged 2.5 years ago to come up with a regeneration catalyst project, what's lovely known in the trade as a meanwhile project. So do something whilst other things are happening, because there's a huge infrastructure investment happening in the area as a result of levelling up money. And this was a starting point, domino one if you like, to get people to see the area differently. It's been a victim of its own previous good fortunes in the fishing industry, which is what most people know Grimsby for. But for 20 odd years, it's been a little bit depressed, and it needs to find its feet again. So this project was aimed at driving the awareness of the opportunities that already exist, so that people can start to see their town differently.
That sounds really rewarding. You touched on the 30 years of experience or research in the wine industry. There's a quote online that says, as part of your transition from that industry into, I guess, the Share a Coke campaign, you had one of the biggest personalised print businesses, if you like, in the country. Is that true? Or?
Yeah, no, it was. I'm going back nearly 20 years, 2007, when my sort of journey through those 30 years, that's going to be a recurring theme, isn't it, in the wine business, was always the need to reinvent, and not necessarily reinvent the product, but reinvent the view of the product. And as margin drained away from the product as a result of competition, be that supermarkets came into the wine business, and it was a race to the bottom, as it often is in terms of price. We needed to constantly reinvent the offering to add that margin back in. So it's a very straightforward business problem. Most people have faced it. And the way that we tackled that was by taking the front label off a bottle of champagne and putting it back on, but with your name on it. So it became a personalised bottle of champagne, and we were the first wine business, really drinks business in the UK, to adopt that strategy. And very quickly that proliferated into all of the gift buying businesses at the time. We're talking about Moonpig, not on the high street, Interflora, John Lewis. And we became very quickly the largest supplier of personalised alcohol gifts in the UK.
Wow, it's quite a tag.
Yeah, it was, and I don't know whether any of us expected that to be the case, but it took off. And although personalisation isn't new, as we know, it's been around for centuries. The notion that you could add a little bit of personality to what was a previously not a standard gift, because it's still a luxury gift when somebody buys somebody a bottle of champagne. It's different, but it's elevated even further by the addition of the personalised label. Okay,
and let's move on to the iconic Share a Coke campaign for Coca-Cola. I think on the questions for the true and false answers, you were going to allude to something, which I wanted you to wait until this point of the conversation. It seemed like it was not an automated task, Richard, or very manual. I think that's what you were about to sort of share. Do you want to talk about that and how that came about?
Yeah, well, it was quite ironic, really. The element that I've just described of personalising individual bottles of champagne was the very thing that attracted the attention of Coca-Cola, because although in the first year of Share a Coke as we know it in 2013 in the UK, they'd put bottles of Coke and cans of Coke into retail stores with 100 of the most popular names in the UK pre-printed on them. They can do that in the factory. They can do 1 million, they can do 1 billion. What they couldn't do was one. And their factories are not set up to do individual stuff, whereas of course we were. So when they approached us, which was towards the end of 2013, to solve a problem that they had, that problem was that what happens if your name wasn't in the top 100? Because from a marketing perspective, they'd done this to provide customer delight, and yet all they'd succeeded in doing was annoying a lot of people that couldn't find their name. And if your mum had spelt Chris with a silent P, for example, you probably wouldn't have found that in Tesco. No. So
or destroyed the shelves looking for it. At least.
We were approached by Coca-Cola to solve that problem, because we, that's what we did, was individual. And I actually asked that question of them when I went in for the first meeting. Why me, sort of the bloke from Grimsby? How on earth has this happened? And they said, quite honestly, we did the research, and every gifting website in the UK that we went to was supplied by you. So here we are, sort of thing. So it was a natural, the biggest drinks company in the world meeting one of the smallest drinks companies in the world.
30 years ago.
Although the largest in the UK, Chris, as you mentioned.
There we go. What a tag. So I guess fast forward a little bit to now. Are there any personalised gifts that you're working with currently, or anything you've done recently?
Yeah, well, that literally set a ball rolling, pardon the pun. That whole 2014, that's 10 years ago. You know, and I speak a lot in my current working life of how personalisation doesn't seem to have moved on from putting your name on something. You know, and that's how most people see it. And if I had my way, I would go back and reinvent that, so people could see it more broad than that, because your name is the least personal bit about you. You know, it's the memories that we have of each other and the emotions that they engender. You know, if you and I, if you were as old as me and we'd grown up as kids listening to the same song and we could remember that line, that would be a personal thing. I would put that lyric on something for you, because you would know that only I know that. If I just put Chris on there, then everybody knows your name is Chris.
So, sorry to cut in there. So in essence, what you're saying is having your name on something isn't personalised.
No, and in fact the whole Coca-Cola campaign wasn't personalised, it was customised, because you were choosing from a preordained list of names that they decided that you could choose from. And I've made many a penny over the years asking audiences which name they wouldn't allow in that database. And that answer, of course, is Pepsi. So Shirley all day long, but Pepsi not so much. So that whole campaign sort of led me to think there's a better way of doing this. And as much as that sounds as though I'm biting the hand that fed me, because Coca-Cola remains to this day my sort of claim to fame, it led on to a number of newer campaigns with different products. You mentioned Marmite. We also did some stuff with Jaffa Cakes, some stuff with Nutella, Toblerone, Kit Kat, you know, all sorts of branded consumer products. All tasty. But the interesting one came along as my first ever speaking engagement, which was at a D-Scoop event in Windsor in 2016. Somebody asked me if I could do personalised footballs, and this was for the Euro tournament that year, Euro 2018. So of course I said yes, that sounds ridiculously easy, and it turns out that it was ridiculously hard, because the notion of printing on the curved surface of anything, for anybody that knows print, flat, we like flat, but curved not so much. And I rather foolishly said yes. I think it was to Carlsberg who wanted to do these footballs, I couldn't find anybody anywhere that could supply those, so created a company to do it, and we wanted to put pictures personalised, so your photo. So photo books were taking off. We recognised the value of people seeing their photos given back to them as a gift, and we wanted to put them on balls, so we called the company Ballpix. Not a long marketing meeting that went into that name. And 2 years later, having worked with partners in the print industry, we developed a technique to enable us to print on the curved surface of a football. And
just going back a couple of steps, you mentioned the phrase customised versus personalised. To me, it seems that the customised is lost or misunderstood by the masses as personalised.
Yeah, they actually chose the wrong word. I mean, if we took it all the way back to not the dawn of time, because that would take too long, but before Share a Coke, you wouldn't call personalisation, you would call it individualisation, because actually it's what do you want it to be that means something to you as an individual, or to us as an individual. I said to you earlier on that we have this habit as human beings of buying each other gifts, but then watching each other unwrap them. And it's not because I don't know what you've got, because I bought it.
I should hope so.
but I want to see your reaction to it. And in that moment, that is the emotional connection that an individualised, bespoke, if you like, gift brings. The word personalisation was used and then completely misused, because most things that you see are not personalised, they're customised. The difference with customisation is you're choosing from a list of things that somebody else has decided. It's a curated
like a letter.
List.
Absolutely. Like a bill from British Gas.
Yeah, kind of. So it's just a curated list. Personalised is when you can type in free speech, effectively. We pride ourselves on free speech, don't we? And then we don't allow anybody to have it. The reason that we don't allow people to have it is the brands are scared to death of what people will actually put. All the words that we all know,
like Pepsi,
and others are available. And largely speaking, if it's possible to do something bad, somebody will. I understand that. However, what's interesting is the majority of people don't. So you can put filters in place, you can have software that's in place to prevent people from putting the words, and that largely negates that problem. So I would have gone back and called Share a Coke a customised campaign, and if I'd have been allowed to write the song lyric from that time that you and I went on that holiday to Ibiza. Do you remember?
I do.
That would be that personalised bit. That's when it becomes personal.
Okay, so sticking with the personalised, not customised. You were just explaining about the footballs. How did that end? Or
it hasn't ended. It's still going. We're now exporting personalised footballs to 54 countries.
Wow. And what kind of balls?
Nike, although other manufacturers are available, and I'm very happy to talk to.
Well, actually, Richard, I was going to ask you what shape balls, but
they're the round ones, Chris. So football, but actually, along that journey, we got into the oval shaped one as well, and we were approached by Gilbert Rugby, who of course are the largest manufacturer of rugby balls, best known brand in that sport, and they wanted to do personalised balls because unless your name's Gilbert, you couldn't get the personalised.
That's customised though, isn't it?
Sort of. So but again, as that word was now out there and owned, there was no point trying to reinvent everybody from. Sure. You'd only go back to the start. There's no point once the genie's out of the bottle.
Okay. What other products are you working on?
Well, that sort of long story from 2014 of Coke through all of those products and all of those shaped balls led us to the door with Gilbert Rugby of England Rugby. They introduced us to England Rugby. Who wanted to have support a ball with your name in it as a fan and what have you, for fan engagement. And we went and had a meeting with them at Twickenham, which was great, and they said, what else do you do? And we sort of said, what else do you want? And they asked the question of us, which I'll ask of you, with the biggest selling item of gift merchandise in their club shop. What would you think that would be for England Rugby?
Oh, that's a question, isn't it? I'm going to say something very obscure, like a drinks holder or something.
Baby grows.
Baby grows.
Stupid dads putting their kids in an England Rugby baby grow. Because when you grow up, son, you're going to be in England.
Yeah, we've all done it.
And at that point, a sort of light bulb went off in terms of merchandise.
Baby grows.
And we came up with the idea of a personalised children's book. That was what the Americans would call the hero's journey, from where little Harry picks up a rugby ball for the first time in the back garden and ends up scoring the winning try for England at Twickenham.
Wow.
And that hero's journey, by the way, is the bedrock of every story that's ever been written.
Of course, yeah.
And we created this book. They gave us a license so that it was official licensed merchandise. This was a year ago, about a year ago last week, and we had one license. And as I sit here today, we have 103 licenses with sporting organisations all around the world that have all got the same problem as England Rugby have, which is how do you engage a generation of children in an era where there's been more noise in their world than there's ever been. How do you get them off their phones and into the garden kicking a ball around? Like I got thrown out in the garden as a 10-year-old and don't come back until you're a professional footballer. Doesn't happen anymore because they're all upstairs in the bedroom either gaming or on their phones. And so that problem for sporting organisations is, where are the fans coming from? Where are the customers coming from? They could see what my dad would call an elegant death as it tapered away. So we're busy creating personalised children's books for some of the biggest sporting organisations in the world.
And that's sticking with the rugby theme. That must lead nicely into American football, because they got the same challenges with kids in their bedrooms playing on their Xboxes, their PlayStations, but also the two games obviously mirror each other.
It's a global problem. Unfortunately, we have a license with the NFL, so we're addressing that. The way that they are looking at doing that is encouraging children to play flag football, which is their equivalent of touch rugby, and in fact has been adopted by the Olympics in 2028 in LA. It will be an Olympic sport, flag football.
Nice.
We also have a book with Team GB, and so we'll be launching that this summer in time for the Olympics. Honestly, Chris, my world has become a series of meetings with organisations that you should be going, oh my God, I'm talking to Manchester United. But when
that's a shame.
When you talk to them, they're just people, businesses with a problem, and they see these books as a part of the solution. So it's still personalised print, and this is a bit more personalised. It's to the point about the argument. They're called You Are the Star. And you make your chosen child, whether it's your own child or godchild or whatever, the star of the book. They can then include their brother or sister or friends. You can be in there as the buyer, their dog, their horse, their cat, their newspaper, their school. The whole book becomes about their world.
Okay.
So when they're reading it, or you're reading it with them, they're immersing themselves not only in that journey and projecting themselves into that role. It's quite interesting, and you know this as an ex-sportsman. whenever you hear anybody interviewed after a victory, they typically always say, I've been dreaming of this since I was 6.
It's true.
So we want to put those dreams back into 6-year-olds and have that world be something that they aspire to be part of. We know it won't happen for everybody.
But there's a link with visualization, isn't there, in sport and belief, and if you can instill that belief and that mental strength from a young age.
100%. I mean, children's books are wonderful, and my daughter is a bookworm as a result of being read to as a young child. But they typically are fantasy oriented, and we always say you're never going to fight a dragon. You're not going to ride a unicorn. There aren't fairies at the bottom of the garden.
Well,
but if you try hard and you work hard and you practice hard, maybe you'll hold the putt that wins the Open.
You never know.
Because somebody's going to.
It could be you. Okay, that sounds exciting.
Yeah, it is.
So
it's the best thing I've done, actually, in all honesty, in all of my working life, in terms of the creation of the product, the hopes and aspirations and delivery that it could bring to generations. I'm really proud of it.
Well done you. Let's just go back a bit further. So, Share Coke, Nutella, Marmite. What happened after that? What was the next phase of Richard Askam's career?
Well, I was rather fortunate, as it turns out, to be invited to come and speak at a D-Scoop event in Windsor. It was at Dorney Lakes, where they actually had the Olympic rowing in London 2012. And I'd never done any public speaking before. And I was invited to come along and sort of tell the story about how some bloke from Grimsby or from Cleethorpes ended up working with the biggest drinks company in the world. So I went and I did as we're doing now and just really sort of chitter-chatted my way through how that had all happened and the story of how it evolved. And somebody came up to me at the end and said, you should do that for a living. And I had never considered A, public speaking, but B, that you could actually make a living from it.
Yeah.
So I considered it on the train on the way home. Do I want to spend the rest of my life sticking labels on things, or do I want to show off on stages around the world?
Yeah,
and I picked the latter.
Well
and 8 years on from that, that's exactly what I do. In my working life, and a combination of speaking or hosting or moderating or commentating, really. I think one of the advantages that I've got, Chris, is that I'm not from the print industry, but I've been a heavy user of it, and therefore can comment from an external perspective, but with some internal understanding, and at the very least be a positive provocateur for what I see, what I think. Take it, leave it, I don't really mind, but I think the conversation needs to be had of how the print industry can stop seeing what it used to be like and start seeing what it could be like.
So I guess you mentioned D-Scoop there. We Infigo had our first interaction with you 6 years ago.
You did?
I think it was
D-Scoop. That sounds bad.
It's a technical.
How did it go?
Technical term, I don't know. I'll let you be the judge.
You were wearing a pink shirt.
Yeah, that wasn't me. The first interaction was with Douglas, actually. So just on that, we've got some quite key Scottish employees here at Infigo. Does any of your books do anything with Scottish rugby at all?
Well, third book that was released was with the Scottish Football Association.
Okay.
We've got one in the works for Scotland Rugby.
Great.
And we've got a licence with Rangers. The irony of that is that the fun part of these books is that you can also, the club or the licence holder can choose who you beat. So when you score that winning goal, you've got somebody to be beating.
Is it Celtic?
Well, it's a team with green and white hoops.
Okay.
That's all I can say.
Yeah.
So we can have a bit of fun with it.
So we actually have two Rangers fans and as I say, 3 Scotsmen in Figo. So I need to keep an eye out for that.
It's nice that you're including them.
I'm trying to. They obviously they get some banter at times.
Well, I am technically part Scottish. My middle name is Stuart, Stuart. I was, according to my father, and I don't have his word for this because he's not with us anymore, conceived actually during the half-time of the World Cup final in 1966 at the Glen Eagles Hotel in Scotland.
Oh, wow. So
that's my link to Scotland.
Okay. And England, technically.
Yeah. That's the way I'm telling it.
Okay, so D-Scoop 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Obviously, we met in Orlando 2019. You were running D-Scoop TV, which we always had to watch out for you. You'd always appear, you're a bit sort of dangerous. And I remember one particular time I thought, I'm just going to have some food. D-Scoop always provides some fantastic refreshments. I'm eating my lunch and I've got a mouthful of food. And I'm watching something going on over there and you just appear here.
Yep.
And you shove a microphone onto my face as these crumbs are going.
Well, the logic of that was, and I'd done a few D-Scoop events by then when we met in Orlando, and I'd suggested the idea of basically based on Martin Brundle's grid walk on the F1. The notion that you catch people off guard means that you probably get more real comments from them than if they know you're coming and they've prepared an interview and you've prepared your answers and it's all a little bit sterile. So I had no problem wandering around sort of tackling people while they were eating or doing anything else for that matter, and it quickly became quite a sort of popular feature of the D-Scoop events, and I really enjoyed doing it, and it sort of plays to my strength as a speaker is the ability to say what I'm thinking straight away, without having to think about it or prepare for it. So live TV is just that, absolutely live, and it's great for the adrenaline.
It was fantastic actually, and I think it added a hell of a lot to the event. That particular event for me was a real highlight in 2019.
Yeah, it was good fun.
The Gaylord, I think.
It was a big beige hotel.
It was a big beige hotel, but there was a lot going on inside it. I'm going to use the C word now.
Okay. Brace yourself.
Brace yourself. How did COVID look for you professionally?
Dear, what a day that was. Never before, I've never witnessed, without the use of CGI, ink being blown off the page of my diary as it emptied. In 48 hours, really, my whole year's work disappeared in 48 hours, to the point where it actually became almost hilarious. That people would just say, "Yeah, sorry, I'm not doing that anymore." And of course, I understood it. But there was a moment there where you think, "Okay, what are we going to do next?"
Scary.
Yeah, it was scary. And although everybody looks back fondly on lockdown 1 because the sun shone and it was like everybody's gap year, and it's 4 years ago now, Chris.
I know,
It's astonishing, isn't it? But fortunately for me, the world very quickly adopted online. And actually, within a month, I would say, of lockdown starting, I was back working again, but without the need to get on a plane. I hosted many a print event from my landing. And we all, as we're doing now, we all adopted different ways of this is the joy of business, I think. It's much more nimble than it gives itself credit for. Because if you can't go that way, you can only go that way. That's the way that we all went.
And you said you got back online. You had a TV channel or a show?
Yeah, I had the very good fortune in my life to meet Morton Wrightoff, the CEO and what is he? The inventor of Inkish TV, I think, the legend that is Morton. Quite early on, actually, before COVID, we'd met and done a few things together. He had this series called The Conversation With, and he foolishly invited me to come and do one in Manchester, actually, I think around about 2018. And he obviously liked the cut of my jib, because he just threw questions at me and I just threw answers back at him, and it was a lovely improvised
I'd love to see that
conversation. Well, it's still available on YouTube. And Morton, bless him, asked me to come over to Copenhagen and record a series of miniature interviews, but they weren't interviews as such, because he would wander around the room off camera and just shout things at me and to talk about. So I did. So it was just really the thoughts that came straight to me about that particular topic, and he recorded them and put them out on the snappily titled Richard Askam channel, which I love the narcissism of. My wife couldn't control my ego for days. Still exists, still there on YouTube. But yeah, Morton and I became good friends, and actually I've been over to his house and had Christmas dinner with his family. They celebrate Christmas like a lot of Scandinavian families before our Christmas. It comes in the Sinterklaas festival, and bless him, he invited me to come and have Christmas dinner. Danish Christmas dinner, random, lots of fish, but it was great, and he's a lovely, lovely man. He
is. We do lots of work with Morton, and he always entertains our crazy, disruptive marketing campaigns. So Inkish, Richard Askam, Are you guys still collaborating? Is there any plans for the future?
Yeah, we're getting back together. We're getting the
Yeah.
band back together this year at Drupa. Actually, my first Drupa.
Okay.
Because
Well, I was going to come on to Drupa, so let's just jump straight into Drupa then.
Yeah,
shall we?
well, my first speaking engagement in the print industry was in 2016, which was a Drupa year. So I wasn't there because they didn't know who the hell I was. So
Yeah.
why would I be? And then the next Drupa would have been 2020. So of course that didn't happen.
Game over.
So
Yep.
this is kind of the next one since that. And
Yep.
so although I'm 8 years now into being a speaker in the print industry, I've never been to Drupa. So
Wow.
Morton contacted me back end of last year and just said, keep Drupa free, I've got an idea. So with Morton, you never ask him what it is because he might not know. So I blocked out the dates in my diary.
Yeah.
And he and I and his crew, because Inkish is a big company, it's not just Morton and an iPhone. I know people think that it is, but it really isn't. We're going to be doing some content from Drupa along the lines of the morning show.
Nice.
I will say no more.
Okay, so you've got the band back together.
Yep.
You're going to be in Drupa. Will you be with Inkish at any other events this year? Or
Hope so. Printing United is one of the plans for later on in the year. Nothing to do with the fact that it's in Vegas.
yeah,
Just
top show though.
Yeah.
Top show.
Well, they very kindly invited me over to speak to do my Adventures on Print Island speech at Printing United.
I'm going to ask you to hold on Print Island for a second. We're going to come to that in a second.
Okay, well that's where I met Morton,
Okay.
actually, funny enough, doing that speech for the first time at an event in Brussels
Right.
in 2018, and Morton was there filming the event. We'd never met, and then as a result of that event, that's where we met. He saw me do that speech, and we've been good friends ever since.
Okay, so we can see you definitely at Drupa.
Yep.
Print United.
Yep.
With Morton and maybe some others.
Yeah, hope so.
Okay. Drupa, fantastic. So look forward to seeing you there. Good luck on your first Drupa.
Thank you.
Print Island. You touched on that. Let's jump into that one. So, what is it? Where is it? What's going on it?
It dreamt up out of my head. 2 years into my sort of work in the print industry as a speaker and as a commentator, if you like, on the industry, and I came to the conclusion, rightly or wrongly, that to me the industry looked as though it all lived on the same island. It knew everybody on that island. Everybody knew everybody on that island. They all talked to each other amazingly well, but they'd never left the island. And it was like an episode of Lost. And I wanted to do a speech that sort of provoked the notion that the opportunity lives elsewhere.
Okay.
So in order to break down the barriers to the opportunity, the first thing you have to do is build a raft.
So what are we talking about? Like an island? You've got a hardware partner, one part of the island. You've got software somewhere else, or are we talking people or machinery? How does it work?
Both. I got a friend of mine who's a graphic designer to draw an island. I'll talk to you in a second about what it was modelled on. And every reference point, so if you think of it as a map, if you were looking at a map of Mallorca, for example, you would look at all the reference points on that thing. Oh, well, I know that place and what have you. So I asked all the reference points to be print industry terms. So we had digital bay and we had wide format lake, and so just, I mean, it was very rudimentary.
Okay.
I didn't know enough about the print industry at the time to be really in depth, but it was enough to be able to make a point. And how digital print at the time, and this is 2018, wasn't catching on in the way that it should do because of the opportunities. The good ship Share Coke had sunk in Digital Harbour, and nobody could get out because nobody could see beyond that. Not that it was a shipwreck, it really wasn't, but it was just a blocker to development. And so I used this whole metaphor of the print island as a way of saying to the industry, if you want to do more of the stuff that you've all invested a load of money in, you've got to get off the island and tell people that you do it, because it was very clear to see that they were great at telling each other how great they were, but when it came to telling customers or brands or agencies, more importantly, there was this gap in their communication, and they didn't really know how to bridge it. So I used this map as the
that was 2018, right? That was 2018.
Yeah.
That gap's still there, isn't it?
A little bit. I think it's been bridged a little bit. I think a few people have left the island and found that there are other islands and other populations elsewhere. And we are. But the rate of development, Chris, has not been as you would expect. When you saw what Share a Coke did, and it moved an industry on 20 years in one go. from a brand's acceptance of the removal of their name for the addition of the customer's name, facilitated by digital print and variable data. You'd think that's got to be the starting gun's gone off now. Everybody's going to charge towards this, and yet we're still largely seeing your name on a bar of chocolate or your name on a mug, or and it has, it hasn't really gone on. And it's not for a lack of ability, because one of the things that I see constantly when I'm at print shows is how unbelievably innovative the industry is.
Yeah.
And it's developed and developed and developed. The irony is, in many ways, it's developed beyond the consumer, and so they don't know. And if you don't know, you don't ask, and if you don't ask, you don't get. We know that. So the gap in many ways still exists, largely, I think, between the print industry and the creative agencies who are responsible for passing those ideas on to the brands, who will then come back to the print industry to deliver. Yeah. So if you don't have that circle, square that circle, you're just left with people living on islands.
And what's really interesting, and I know you make this point regularly, but the industry, the print industry, as we look at it, is very technical. It's very, there's a hell of a lot going on, very innovative, as you said. You said before that it's the tech industry. You believe it's the tech industry?
I do. I think it's the tech industry, and the print industry just doesn't know it. Yeah. Because it's still, in many ways, as a lot of legacy industries do, and I include motor manufacturing in this. I include the fishing industry from Grimsby we talked about earlier on. Yeah. It hankers for the days that it knows, rather than risking on the days that it doesn't know. Okay. Yesterday is way safer than tomorrow. Yeah. And when you feel like that, it's quite hard to talk about tomorrow. Yeah. Even though, ironically, they're investing millions of pounds in technology and the ability to do tomorrow, but they'd rather talk about yesterday. And that's how it's becoming a problem, I think, for attracting the next generation into the print industry. Because it sounds a bit old-fashioned, and yet they're probably at the cutting edge of technology. They are, as a manufacturing industry, but very reticent, seemingly, to talk about it.
And the problem-solving abilities they have now, and the use of the technologies and AI and things, it's
incredible.
It's scary what they can.
It really is, and that's why I say, with all hand on heart, it's the tech industry. It just doesn't know it.
Okay, you mentioned that phrase recently. I say recently, back in December in LA. For the Mimaki microfactory, you led an event over there, series of talks. I think the way I took it, you were putting together, getting everyone in one room, explaining what they need to know, explaining what they don't know, and why they need to understand more. Do you want to share a bit of thought from your point of view on the Mimaki microfactory, why you pulled that together, and what the vision is there?
Well, the idea really was to boil down the sheer volume of information that you typically get at a big print show. And you've been at enough, and I've been at a few, and it's overwhelming at times. You're presented with hall upon hall of ideas, and sometimes it's quite hard to go away with clarity. And Mimaki approached us in earlier on this, where are we? Last year, 2023, wanting to do something a little bit different and asking for suggestions about what different could look like. Yeah. And I'm a big believer, Chris, that life, and this sounds like an Elvis song, so forgive me, should be a little less presentation and a little more conversation. Because I think we're hardwired as human beings to want to overhear interesting conversations. Yeah. It's why we sort of wig into conversations in bars and in airport lounges, and why, because they're interesting. And yet when you get to events, the presentations on stage can be a bit sterile, they can be a bit salesy, and the audience tunes out of the very thing that the speaker is there to do. So we suggested to Mimaki that we break all of that down. Yeah. And almost the Top Gear idea, where the presenters are in the middle of the room and they're surrounded by the audience, and they're having a conversation with the guests.
And the kit as well.
And the kit. They're having a conversation with the guests, but also with the audience. And there isn't that Q&A, there isn't that them and us. Yeah. It's just a conversation amongst people that are all like-minded, different stages of their learning, but much more willing to engage if they don't feel threatened by the Q&A. Who's got any questions? And everybody puts their hands down because they don't want to be seen to not know the answers. No. So, it's a very old-fashioned construct that we put people under pressure to prove that they don't know enough. So why don't we take that pressure away so they can learn more? And actually, ironically, consequentially, you'll sell more as a result. Stop selling and people will start buying.
Okay. explain that in a bit more detail.
Mimaki were very clear that, and we did the event, as you know, you were there as one of the exhibitors in their demo centre in Los Angeles.
What a location, by the way.
It was really tough going to LA in December, wasn't it?
It was hard work,
we won't do all that. And they really wanted people, customers, prospects to see their equipment working in real time, actually producing the things that they can do, and have the exhibitors be there, part of that microfactory, that workflow. Infigo were there in their role as part of that automated web to print. There are other partners in that food chain, if you like, who were also there. And what it showed the prospects, the potential customers for all of that equipment, not just Mimaki, but everybody in that sort of food chain, how it can all work together seamlessly when you put those things in place. I think what tends to happen at print shows, and it's no fault of the exhibitors, is everybody's seen in isolation, and so you don't necessarily line up the solution. People buy with their eyes, right? We know that. We do that as customers. If you see something being done, the chances are you'll go, that's what we need. If you see it in different halls and you've had lunch or dinner in between, we're not very good at connecting the dots in our head. So we go away with a series of bits of information, but not a cohesive solution. And my goal, as I see it as a speaker when I'm at these events, is for people to go away with the thought that I hadn't thought of it that way. If we could create that curiosity with a smaller, more focused event, generate the breadcrumbs, don't try and sell to them, just show them what it's for, not what it is. I believe that will lead to greater sales. And in fact, Mimaki would agree with me.
Yeah, and I think it was amazing to see the change in kind of persona, or the kind of the vibe of the attendee. It seemed a lot more relaxed.
Everybody dropped down a level. Everybody became their human self rather than their professional self. We took all of the veneer off the whole idea that we're there to impress and we're there to present. There was only one guy, if you remember, that broke the rules and tried to sell, and he actually didn't sell anything because he tried to sell. And we're quite good as human beings as working out. We don't like being sold to typically. We like to buy rather than be sold to. So you remove that pressure from sales, and actually it leads to sales. I mean, it's counterintuitive.
No, but it makes sense. It makes sense, and I think one of the things I found, again, some great conversations there. We were just being very honest and sharing war stories, if you like. but it was there's a need, there's a hunger, a desire from the US market to integrate and work with partners and really look for that return on investment. And it was really apparent there because the kit was there. Like we said, the facility was amazing where it was hosted. I was blown away with how good some of their machinery was. I never realised what they offered. It was absolutely amazing.
Well, you only ever get a snapshot, don't you, at the big events? And I know the major manufacturers spend a lot of money on their stands and they take a lot of kit and what have you, but it tends to work in isolation. And I think what they did very well, and this is why I think that the notion of these events, these smaller events, more focused events, and not just an open house where it's come and have a look at our kit. It's an event, hence why they called it the microfactory, where you can see everything lined up, everything working. The guy Hector who took a selfie of himself and somebody in the audience and then walked around the corner and showed them how it would appear on a t-shirt. And there was intakes of breath, wasn't it? And this is just printed t-shirts. That's not rocket science.
No, it's not.
But what it demonstrates in doing something simple is how easy it is to take advantage of the opportunity that already exists.
Okay. Well, hopefully there'll be more of those.
Good, yes, I hope so.
Fantastic. I'm going to come on to FESPA / the personalisation experience.
Okay.
Launched it last year. I think that's right, last year.
Yeah, it was.
We were in attendance. It was our first FESPA. We had a very good show there. It was probably the first time I've seen something focused purely on personalisation, not customisation. You led a series of webinars and podcasts in the build-up. Some very interesting guests and things. I think Douglas and myself even joined one of them. It's obviously back for a second year. You're obviously there for a second year. What's new? What's different?
Well, if I go back one stage from there of where it came from as an idea, and FESPA very kindly invited me over to Belgium in the autumn of 2022 to do a speech As it turns out, and this is part of my world, Chris, is you never know who's in the audience, so you always need to be on your best behaviour. And in the front row of the audience, and I didn't know because we'd never met, was Neil Felton from FESPA, the CEO.
Yeah.
And he tapped me on the shoulder after the event and said, "We've been wanting to do what you've just done as FESPA for some time, which is really to blow up the whole personalisation debate and have it properly, because it's being had sporadically and in isolation, and therefore it's not become a cohesive conversation."
Sure.
So it was the catalyst to the Personalisation Experience edition 1, which was last year in Munich.
Yeah.
And they very kindly asked me not only to chair the event but also to be the Personalisation Experience ambassador.
Ooh.
Which I think actually puts me about 18th in line to the British throne, which is good.
And you come from Grimsby as well.
The first king from, well, not the first king from Grimsby. Well, that's a Viking thing. We'll come back to that. It was in Munich last year for the first time. 3-day event, 3-day conference. Probably in hindsight that was too long. I think in order to keep an audience engaged, a shorter but more focused track.
Yep.
And that's what we're doing this year. So we've learned the lesson from year 1, and this year is going to be a 1-day serious conference, a little bit more conversation, a little bit less presentation, but it's going to run alongside an actual presentation down on the show floor, personalisation zone, where not only will you be able to hear about it in theory, you'll be able to see it in practice.
Brilliant.
And this is the point about buying with your eyes. So I think this year it's in Amsterdam on March the 20th. I think it's going to be a great event this year. We've got a great and very diverse speaker lineup from I was telling you earlier on, we've got the guy that leads the Sky Sports presenting team for the NFL, who's talking about personalised books.
Nice.
We've got the creative director of Ogilvy, one of the world's largest advertising agencies, who wants to know what the print industry can do, because strangely enough, they've never told him. We've got some fabulous speakers, and then this practical thing at the end of the day, hopefully with a glass of wine in your hand. I think you're joining us to speak as well. We've got a panel at the end of the day that I'm calling the Game of Thrones.
Nice.
Which you will be one of.
Jon Snow.
Jon Snow, yeah, okay, I'll give you that. Just really to try and boil down this year. Last year was more, what does personalisation mean to you?
Yeah.
We established that it means different things to different people, because there's many words that describe it. So this year is boiling that down into, okay, and what can you do with that knowledge? So it's going to be an interesting event.
It's a fantastic concept. The event for us last year was brilliant. We did some collaborations with Infocus, Kongsberg and HP, but it was also our first FESPA, and it was really eye-opening to see what opportunity there is there. I think if you guys are, so you say you guys are going to be in the middle of it all, right?
Yeah. So the setup at the RAI in Amsterdam is different anyway. We were a little bit on the fringe last year.
Yeah.
I think the location, and this isn't me saying this. This was everybody saying this.
Sure.
The irony was we were at Sign Expo, but nobody could find it. Go figure. But this year the signs will be excellent, and the conference space is going to be better. We're going to be doing it a little bit more in the round again, so people feel involved in it. I don't like this us and them scenario when you're preaching to an audience. I want them to be part of that conversation. And then at the end of the day, on March the 20th, where everybody that's at the conference will go down to the show floor and actually not just hear about it, but see it happening as well.
And that's what we found. That was my point. At FESPA in Munich, once we'd integrated with those other partners, we were into the main hub of the show experience, and I think that's where personalisation belongs, because it's a major part of everything, as you know. I'm preaching to the converted here, but that's great news. Excited about that, Richard.
Yeah, very much.
What other events have you got on the go this year? Anything you want to share?
It's busy. Well, March really is the travelling season for me when it begins. And as you know, Chris, anybody that says that travelling is glamorous hasn't done it enough.
They haven't,
because you're just in a queue somewhere else in the world. So I will be at the Online Print Symposium in March, which
Mr.
is
Zipper.
Mr. Zipper. And you never see him and Russell Crowe in the same room.
You don't, do you?
Just saying.
Yeah, I do think that actually.
Yeah.
Do you know you can find him sometimes in Blackpool?
Really? Okay.
Ask him about that.
Okay.
Ask him about that.
I will. I'm really quite.
I'm not going to say why, because maybe he'll come on here and he'll he'll explain what that means. But
and tell him he was great in Gladiator as well from me. So I got OPS and then FESPA the week after, and then a little bit of time at home, and then off to the US, and then Drupa, and then something in Portugal, and then a plane somewhere,
Yeah,
and a stage and a microphone, and by August I'll forget my name.
Yeah.
So,
good for you.
and then Printing United. So
Of course.
Again,
Yes.
first time at
Yes.
Printing United this
wow.
September.
So you've picked the Vegas Print United to come to.
They picked me, to be fair.
Did they? Okay.
Let's say that sounds better. But yeah, I mean, my wife obviously is disappointed that I'm going to Vegas for work. So yeah.
I have to say, I was sceptical when it was moved to Atlanta last year. I haven't been to Vegas the previous year, but the show was fantastic.
It's quite the thing, isn't it? Really. You know, I've never attended, but I've seen a lot of footage, and obviously I know a lot of people that go and attend, and they do say it's the Olympics of print, basically.
Print is live and kicking in North America.
Yeah,
it really
very much.
is in most verticals.
Yeah.
Okay, Richard, I've got a question for you. You've touched on this many times in today's session. What would you say to the next generation working in our industry? The next generation coming through. Yeah,
I think it is to let your eyes see what it is, not somebody else's lips tell you what it is. Okay. You know, my experience of watching students at print shows with wide eyes open as they see genuinely the amount of tech that's involved in, I mean, not just what you guys do, but across the industry. You look at what AI is doing, you look at what AR is doing. You know, anybody that says print is dead doesn't understand what mortality means, because I don't think it's ever been more alive. But what I would say to that next generation is, come and see. You know, I've never quite understood, and I know it's been tried and it hasn't really worked, but a print show should invite, there should be a student day. You know, come and break the internet, kids, and see what you can do. Because let's be honest, I'm a stupid old white man. You know, I know nothing about anything tech-wise. I can make it work, but I don't really know how it works. The next generation are the ones that are actually developing it. So you never know. The next generation actually might be the solution.
Okay, that's fantastic. There's just one thing I just wanted to just circle back on. I seem to remember one of your D-scoops where you were sharing a conversation, and there were students from Arizona State University.
Yeah.
Who are an Infigo customer, by the way, I just have to say. And also...
That's Phoenix.
Was it Phoenix? Was it?
Right.
Yeah. So do you want to just share the insight there? Because I think that nicely touches on your whole vision of the future.
Well, I you know, as you know now, and a number of people that have heard me speak before at print events, I usually say what I'm thinking, which hopefully has some merit. At the very least, it provokes a conversation. Yeah. And it was my first time in the US as a speaker at Phoenix, D-Scoop of Phoenix, and I'd done my speech earlier on in the day, and the organisers dropped me in at the last minute to host a panel because whoever was down to do it couldn't do it, and they said, do you mind hosting this panel? And I knew nothing about what they were talking about, but what became very obvious was, to my right hand side was a group of students that had been invited from Arizona State, and to my left were the print industry, and I started the panel by introducing them. So I said, print industry, here's your future, here's your print industry. You guys should stand closer together and talk a bit more. Nice. And that sort of started that whole notion that, come on, you know there's so much learning that can happen from both sides, back and forth and back. I mean, we know this now. When you know, look at the iPhone, right? The iPhone is less than 20 years old as an invention, and yet it's completely revolutionised our world to the point where wherever you're standing, you are the media. Yeah. You are broadcasting your own content to the world. So our children are way more advanced and experienced at the use of that technology than we are. So shouldn't we get them in to think about how we can make that work in the print industry? And on that note, on that bombshell, thank you very much, Richard. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.